Hey, boys and girls, it's Mr. G, and today and this week we are going to be working with measuring angles with a half circle protractor. So before we begin, make sure you have a pencil, paper, and a straight edge. All right. So let's see if I can try to highlight all I need to while we're working here. Okay. So, ooh, that might be something we try out later. Anyway, so let's take a look. We are going to first review some angles. The angles we are going to be using and measuring, we should be familiar with at least the categories of the different angles so that when we measure them, it makes sense what our measurements come out to be, right? So, for example, um, our first thing that we're going to be doing, and if we had our journals, it would be page 215. But our math message was to use a straight edge to draw the following angles, and do not use a protractor. Now, I'm guessing that many of you do not have a protractor like this one, or a template like this one. So we are going to get a little creative, and we're going to be using a website that will help us measure angles and manipulate something that resembles a protractor, and it will hopefully work out for us. But first, let's try drawing without a protractor, just a straight edge, an angle that measures less than 90 degrees, an angle that measures more, and an angle that measures exactly 180. So more than 90 and 180 is that middle one, right? So let's go for it. Pause and let's measure or draw, right? Now, did you, with the first angle, draw an angle that looked like this? What do we call that angle? And how about the second angle? Did we draw something that looked like this? What do we call this angle? We're going to be working on measuring these types of angles today. But nonetheless, let's get into talking about each angle. This particular angle here is an acute angle. And let's take a look at what that one looks like. Acute angle is anything that's less than 90 degrees. So it could look like this, it could look like that, or any of these other options, right? Now, the next angle was an obtuse angle, and they are between 90 and 180 degrees, and they could look like any of these, something that's almost straight to almost exactly an angle like this. Now, do we remember this type of angle? Yes, it is known as a right angle. A right angle is exactly 90 degrees, and it is the corner of, say, a rectangle or a square, and many other polygons too. But this is a very particular angle because when we measure those angles and we have that angle, it is something that we use as a reference point. If it's less than this angle, it's an acute. If it's more, it's an obtuse angle. And that brings us to our another reference point kind of angle, a straight angle. A straight angle resembles just a straight line. It's 180 degrees. And if we think about if we are standing exactly still and then we turn around halfway around and we're facing the opposite direction, we've made a 180 degree turn. And that's what this angle represents. Now, what's larger than a 180 degree angle? Do you remember the name of that one? Yes, a reflex angle. Anything larger than 180, but less than a full circle all the way around. A full circle would be 360. So a reflex angle could be 192 degrees. It could also be 248. So it could be the opposite sides of really any angle that is less than 180 degrees. So it could be the opposite of an acute angle like this one. This outside would be reflex. It could be the opposite of this angle, which is the opposite side of the obtuse angle. And that's one way that I like to think about it is it's kind of the outside measurement of typical angles that we use. But nonetheless, those angles are the key angles that we want to remember. And a way to remember them all, I like this picture here. We have acute, obtuse, and then reflex. Those angles, and then we have the right angle, and we don't have this written over here, but what would this be again? Yes, a straight angle. So those are, this is just a nice little graphic to kind of help us see the different size angles that we are working with today. Now, a 360-degree circle. If we had a line for every single degree, it would look something like this. Do you remember this from Unit 5? Yes, this is a 360-degree circle with a division mark on every single degree. Now, that looks kind of overwhelming, but if we measure angles, we usually use a half circle protractor. And it looks something like this, or some of the other ones that I'll be showing you in a moment. But these protractors, this tool that we use, only measures 180 degrees. It doesn't measure a full circle going all the way around. But we can use this to measure any angle between 0 and 360. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. How do we measure a reflex angle? There were some clues on the previous slides that I was just showing you. So let's get going. Let's talk about some of these types of angles because sometimes the angles aren't perfectly lined up. Sometimes they're upside down. Sometimes we have to rotate this protractor and we have to use it in a variety of ways. So I'm going to show you how to do it with a real one, and then we're going to take a look at how to do it with virtual protractors, okay? So let's jump into using a real one, okay? We have a few angles that I drew. I don't know the measurements of them yet. I promise, I swear. But what we're going to be doing is thinking about how we go about lining up a protractor like this one so that we can measure the angle correctly. Now, depends on the protractor we use. We have this one here as well, and you might notice that they have slightly different designs. This one is attached to the template, so it isn't perfectly, sort of easy to move around, but it still can be used very well. Now, this style of protractor has a line right down here at the bottom. And this line right here is that key important line that we need to line up with this point. Do you remember the name of that point of the angle? It is, in a way, sometimes people refer to it as the middle of the angle, but that's not the right term. We want to call this part the vertex. Now, it might also be known, sometimes people refer to it as the corner of the angle. Also, not the most accurate term. We want to be using the right word, vertex. So that vertex is a really important point for us to get started measuring the angle. We want to line up our protractor with this point right here that is in line with the 0 line or the 180 line of the protractor. And it's a little bit different between each model. Now, this one has a really neat little hole right in the middle here. It's a nice little point that we can kind of line it up and line it up right there on that point. Now, the second step after lining up the vertex. So step 1, line up the vertex. Step 2 is to line up a 0 point. Now with this particular protractor, I'm going to show you a little bit closer so we can really get zoomed in. I'm lining up this little line right here in the bottom of my protractor with one of the arms or sides of the angle. And I'm going to make sure that I keep my center point also right there on the vertex, right? So now I've got both of those things in place. Now, if this is the 0 line, and you might notice that there's also a 180, I'm going to need to start counting up from this side because I'm measuring in this direction, okay? So I'm not going to use the numbers that go down. I'm going to be using the numbers that go up. And then you might notice that every half circle protractor is going to have 2 sets of numbers like this. We are going to be using the numbers that are counting up from the side that we are measuring from. So this number right here is 0, and we're counting our way up. And before we go any further, we ask ourselves, what kind of angle is this? Well, we can say that it is less or greater than 90 degrees. And you notice how I put my pencil right here. It helps me get a sense of, yeah, this is about 90 degrees. So I'm going to guess that this is a little bit more than halfway to 90. And I'm going to say it's around 60 degrees. That's going to be my estimate, right? 60. And let's find out. Okay, so again, I'm going to line up the vertex as my first step. And then my second step is to line up a side with 0 degrees. And then I count up to where the second line crosses the protractor. Now, I'm a little bit off from my estimate. As we can see, 60 degrees is up here, and this is 50, and it's even less than that, just a couple degrees less. I'm going to say that this is about 48 degrees. Okay, so that's how we measure an angle. I'm going to show you another example. This one is obtuse, and if we notice, this right here would be about 90 degrees, so it's a little more, right? So I'm going to first line up my vertex. The second thing I'm going to do is rotate that protractor to line up a side of the angle with a 0 mark. This time the 0 mark is on the outside, and I'm going to count up until I get to my angle. Now this one again is long enough to reach the edge of the protractor, so I can see right here that it's past 90 degrees, which was here, all the way up to about 109. That is about the length, or not the length, the measure of the rotation from this side to that side. And that's really what we want to think about when we measure angles, is that it's not about how long something is or how big it is, but it's really about how much rotation or how much this pencil would turn from one side to the next. And that is what measuring angles is all about. Okay, so we are going to, and yes, we can also use this cool little tool that I will be sharing with you as well to kind of see kind of the different types of angles and how big they are and how it kind of works. Isn't that neat? So I'll share this link with you as part of our assignment. But what you're going to be doing, the work you're going to be doing is actually going to be in this page. And it has a virtual protractor. And you can see that I can move it around. You can also see that when you hold the shift key, see if I see right here, hold down the shift key, you can then rotate it. So we are going to do a couple demonstrations with the left side of this, this page, because the right side is where you are going to be answering some questions. We have 4 different levels of angles, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, that we're going to be working on. And you're going to be working on just the right side of this page. You can do the left side for practice too, and you can check the answers that way. But you must submit your work for the right side in this measuring angles form, which is a part of the assignment on Google Classroom. So let's practice a little bit with this protractor, this virtual protractor. So first, I'm going to line up that vertex. Can we see that? I'm going to zoom it in a little bit more. Then we are going to hold down that shift key and rotate until a 0 mark is lined up with the side. And then we can take a measurement. And I'm going to make sure that this center point is right there on the vertex. And that looks pretty good to me. Now, what is our measurement? Well, we have 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 1, 2, maybe 3, 63, or 62. No, 62 degrees. Okay, and we can enter that right here in our site. But what I want you to make sure to do is, for any of the right ones, that you also copy it over into the Google form. Okay, so you can have 2 tabs open if that's something that's easy for you to do, or you can write down these answers as we go and submit it. Those are many ways to do it. We are going to be using this virtual protractor to help us do the problem. Now, this virtual protractor needs to go with us. We need to bring it down to the next problems, right? We need to drag it down to the next ones or the next one. Now, look, these ones have more challenging directions. So let's skip all the way down to there. And we are going to line up that vertex with that center point. And I'm going to zoom in again to make sure that it's on that center point. That looks pretty good. All right, now we are going to try to measure this angle. Okay, so vertex on the center point, and then hold that shift key, rotate, and one more. Yeah, that is about where the 0 mark is. Now, so one side is lined up with 0, and we're going to count up from 0, and I get about 32. And that's the size of that angle. Okay, so practice with this tool. Make sure that you record your work in the measuring angles form. And I will also share this page for help with you, to help you remember the different types of angles. All right. And that is our main homework or main work to do this week in math. It is not a big week for math. There are no virtual journal pages. There is this Google form. And then there's also some division work and Dreambox, which is something that we are required to do each week. So, happy Tuesday, and I hope to see everyone at our class meeting.